guys, it's Janet on occasion, and today we're not actually playing campaign. This is going to be a sort of episode X.5 essentially. I'll be putting these in between the campaign episodes just to help fill in the gaps because there's a lot to cover about this world. So today we're going to be talking about religion in the old world, but mainly the Empire. So this is actually going to be a series of videos. I'll be doing an episode per deity. So first off, though, we're going to talk about sort of religion as a whole, how it affects people, and then we'll go into what the connotations of each cult is, and how they do things and what those gods mean individually. So to begin, I'm going to actually read the very first page of Tome of Blessings, which is a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition. It's part of the core set, and it gives a great introduction to religion in the Empire. So the old world is dark and cruel place. Disease and deprivation fall on the good and the wicked alike. Evil spirits and powerful demons prey upon the people's very souls. In the face of this, the inhabitants of the Empire turn to faith and superstition to protect them. The gods offer a sliver of hope in a violent and dangerous world, but that sliver is enough to make men cling to their faith with desperate strength. Only a fool ignores the gods, and only a madman insults them. The Empire is steeped in religion and superstition. From birth to death, the gods watch over all aspects of life. From dawn to dusk, a man will pray to many gods many times as he goes about his daily life. The gods are everywhere, always watching and judging their flock. Every part of the world comes under the domain of a god, and sometimes the domain of smaller local spirits as well. Then there are the dark gods, their temples hidden, their worship banned, but their force still felt and feared by all. The gods of the old world are capricious and whimsical, and few see rhyme or reason in their interactions with mortal life. All hope and pray for miracles and blessings, but know the gods may just as well send down burdens instead. The gods may even strike a man down in any instant, and as such they are feared as much as they are praised. That is right and proper, for the gods are mighty, and men are small and insignificant by comparison. There are 10 prominent gods citizens of the Empire worship. They are all recognized and treated with respect. Some people may choose one god over the others to be the focus of their worship. A rarer few still will join the cult of one god and become a priest. The priests of each god maintain the countless temples and shrines to their deity, and are scattered across the Empire, and guide the common folk in worship. Those who rise to the high positions of these imperial cults tend to the rituals and the faithful, and guide the entire Empire in its worship. No matter their position, priests of the imperial cult show respect to all the other gods, however, and expect their followers to do likewise. The practices and rituals of worship vary greatly across the Empire. In the Reichland, where the faith is strongly influenced by centralized organizations, there is general uniformity. But in the distant provinces, the practices may be very different, possibly changing from village to village. Depictions and stories of the gods themselves may differ. Yet, most citizens of the Empire recognize that they all worship the same gods, however they may be worshipped. It is often this united faith in a shared pantheon that binds the Empire together as one people. They may know of foreign gods and faiths beyond the limits of the Empire, but these are simply signs of the ignorance or heathen nature of such unenlightened folk. Some also know of the dark gods and those who worship them, and look to the priests and witch hunters to guard them against such foes. All the gods are great, but there is one that is loved above all by the people of the Empire, Sigmar. He walked as a man among them, and founded their great empire. The citizens of the Empire, his chosen people, and he watches over them with greater care than the other, more distant deities. The worship of Sigmar takes place throughout the Empire, and often his faith is inseparable from life of the Empire. All of the gods have a degree of worldly power and secular influence, but Sigmar stands for the Empire, and it is not uncommon for his faith and followers to permeate imperial politics and life. While each god may have warrior priests and devoted Knight Templars, the wars of the Empire are Sigmar's personal battles. It may be the Emperor and the nobles that declare war, but it is faith in Sigmar that drives the common man to take to the battlefield, and it is the words of Sigmar's pious warrior priests that give him the courage to face the enemy. Okay, so we get it. They bloody love Sigmar in this place, right? Love him. Can't get enough of him. And we will actually do probably an episode, possibly even two, talking about him, because he's sort of really tied into the story and the origin story of the Empire. So he is a very important figure in the history of the Reichland. So we will be covering him in more detail. But I do want to actually just sort of give a rundown of all of the gods, just in brief, so that way when I mention them in passing, you know roughly what they relate to. But of course they all will get their own episode at some point. So there's Manan, the god of sailors, sailing in the seas. There's Mor, who is the god of dreams and the dead. Myrmidia, who's the goddess of honourable combat, martial virtues and soldiers. There's Renald, the god of rogues, tricksters and fortune. Raya, the goddess of fertility, farming and love. Then there's also Raya's husband, known as Tal, who is sort of the less, cultured version of Raya. So whereas she's sort of more god of farming, he's god of the wildlife and the forests. Then there's Shalia, who's the goddess of healing, mercy and childbearing. Sigmar, of course, who is the god of the empire and its people, hammer against its foes. Ulrich, the god of battle, winter and wolves. And Verena, the goddess of knowledge, learning and justice. So hopefully that gives you some indication of the pantheon there. So I'm going to continue on here, talk about folk worship. So the faithful of the empire generally fall into two groups: common citizens, for whom worship is an almost casual activity, and members of the various cults, for whom faith defines their entire lives. For the common folk, worship is mostly informal, but religion is ingrained in their lives in countless ways. Every child is told of the gods from birth, and reverence and study of the gods is a sign of good upbringing or scholarship. Following their strictures and rituals is a sign of good manners and civic duty. Neglect or disregard for the gods might be seen as carelessness or disrespectful. What's more, it can be dangerous. A sailor who forgets to say a prayer to Manan and his ship moves out from the harbour is inviting catastrophe. As is a soldier marching to battle who does not ask Sigmar for strength or Ulrich for courage. In both cases, his companions may remind him of his laxity, not wanting to be standing near someone who is so eager to tempt the gods to punish him. The line between faith and superstition is blurred for most common folk. Some rituals and observances are so odd or ingrained that the people who practice them may have forgotten their religious meaning, performing them more out of habit or to avoid bad luck than any faithful devotion. Others offer sacrifices or donations more for social reasons than religious ones. It is good for business for a merchant to be seen donating wealth to the Temple of Shalia or other worthy causes, and every commander knows his men fight better when they hear Sigmar is with them. The gods are invoked as they are needed. A sailor or fisherman may call to Manan every day, but another man might only invoke Manan's name should he take a journey on a boat. A farmer or trapper might make offerings to Tal or Rhea throughout the year, whereas a city dweller may only entreat Tal when travelling through the forest by coach. The gods are not simply called into emergencies or for deliverance from danger, however. Religion is the heartbeat of the empire, and influences nearly every part of life. The boat traveller may thank Manan for the beauty of the waters that morning, and the city dweller might ask Tal to keep the road smooth and dry as to speed him to his destination. Reverence of the gods is clear in many empire names, which often mean things such as beloved of Ulrich or from Verena. Many coats of arms or insignias feature religious imagery, and the symbols of the gods are carved into the stone and wood of houses and their buildings. People wear small charms, tokens, or other signs of their religion to identify their faith to others, and of course, to the watching gods themselves. References to the gods abound in songs and rhymes, in the names of days and months and times of year, and in many figures of speech. Common folk practice formal rituals as well. There are many holy days and festivals marked throughout the year and over a lifetime. Most people regularly attend local temples or shrines, where they pray together or perform rituals as a community of faith, led by the local priest. Temples are often the centre of events at local festivals. In such bleak times, the citizens of the empire relish these festivals. So, mentioned that there are a lot of folk songs, and actually, in this book there is a folk song. All the lyrics written here. There's no score, but to me it feels so much like an Irish folk song. It's actually a Reiklander folk song, but then who really knows the tempo and cadence of that kind of song? So I'm actually going to recite it, which won't be embarrassing at all. I says a prayer to old man Moore, that me father's resting fine. In his repose while above him grows the field now are mine. I says a prayer to Mother Rhea, that me oats will grow up well. So come son, still we'll have our fill and plenty more to sell. I says a prayer to bearded Tal, Keep them beastmen in their lair, as oats are towed in wagon load down to the market square. I says a prayer that Shallya's hands will hold me in glad fast, as plague and war took me other far, and this one be my last. I says a prayer to Varenar as the market deals are turnin', that all declare me price is fair and it makes a tidy earnin'. I says a prayer that Manann's grace has sent ships in from Outsea, and captains come with tidy sums for each delivery. At last I pray to sly Renald for the tricks he has supplied, so farming men who know of them can make a little on the side. See, that wasn't embarrassing at all. So I also mentioned the superstitions and folk customs, of which there are a lot. So this is obviously just, things that the common man, believe and do, etc. So, yeah, I'm gonna talk to you about that for a bit. So, in a world full of wizards casting spells, demons of chaos tempting the faithful, and bizarre mutants roaming the wildlands, the inhabitants of the old world are, by intent or in defense, incredibly superstitious. There is rarely a moment that goes by when the average person doesn't take into account some superstitious ritual, such as muttering a prayer after crossing the shadow of a plague victim, or tossing a bit of spilt salt over one's shoulder. Superstitions run the gamut, from the fate of a person, curses, and even the occasional boon. Most of the superstitions in the Empire are ancient beyond compare, and few people can remember exactly what the reasoning for it may have been. Still, traditions in the Empire die hard, and regardless of whether these superstitions continue to have any power or purpose, is meaningless to the majority of its inhabitants. The hard, harsh life of most citizens of the Empire makes them view almost every event with a superstitious eye. Most of it with a cynical, paranoid bent. Regardless of a person's learning or status, superstitions manage to creep into the daily routine. A person believing they are under the effects of a curse caused by a superstition can usually be cured through some sort of superstitious act. Entire industries exist of charlatans and self-proclaimed mystics offering advice and ingredients to reverse the effects of a superstition gone wrong. Naturally, none of these efforts actually work, and the word of people proclaiming such things may reach the ear of a witch hunter. But then obviously, the old world is a big place, the Empire is massive, and so that does actually have an effect on how, gods are worshipped and whatnot. So there are actually variations in folk customs. So just as the Empire is really a collection of semi-unified peoples under the banner of a single emperor, so are the beliefs of its inhabitants. Customs of worship vary from place to place. Old Worlders are notoriously insular by nature, and most rarely venture more than a few miles from their homes. As a result, beliefs and religious customs have slight variations even among settlements relatively close to one another. Those people that travel more extensively usually accept this fact for what it is, as long as the customs they encounter do not come across as blasphemous or too far from what is considered acceptable. Most of the variations in worship are minor. For example, a town celebrating the coming of spring may require revelers to wear flowers in their hair, while those in the village down the road wear wreaths of flowers around their necks. However, there are times in which these variations can be jarring for a foreigner travelling to a different region. Depending on their beliefs and how rigid their mindset is, some of these variations may come across as heretical or blasphemous. Witch hunters, always on the prowl for heresy, begrudgingly accept the fact that the Empire is large, and unified practice of occult customs is impossible. Still, if an isolated community takes these differences too far, the gossip and shock generated is sure to pique the witch hunter's interest. So I've actually mentioned witch hunters a few times now, and I will want to cover them in a lot of detail once I talk about the cult of Sigmar and Sigmar himself in another video. But I do want to give you a bit of a taster, because, I have mentioned them a lot, and they are actually, they're someone that would be sort of feared by common folk. They have real relevance to day-to-day life. If they turn up and, find one of your rituals a bit funny, then it's the common man that suffer. It's not, they're not warriors. They're not the ones on the battlefields. They're the ones that will just stamp out local threats. So they're actually very relevant to the common man, which is kind of what we're trying to talk about here. So I'll give you a little taster, to help you get a picture of what they're like. So the imperial authorities legislate heavily against heresy and employ witch hunters to sniff out the worshippers of the dark gods. Sanctioned witch hunters are members of the Holy Order of the Templars of Sigmar, a militant arm of the cult of Sigmar, but are controlled by both the Grand Theogonist and the Emperor. Not even the priesthood or the state is above suspicion of heresy, and this arrangement ensures that neither can prejudice the witch hunters' investigations. Members of the Templars of Sigmar seek out secret chaos cults, hidden mutants, and unsanctioned sorcerers, and have the authority to detain suspects at will. Some work alone, while others recruit warriors, priests, and wizards to help them. The enemy is cunning and deadly, so witch hunters use any means necessary to get the truth. Torture is a common method of interrogation, not only to secure the confession, but also to force a prisoner to implicate collaborators. Cultists and witches rarely operate on their own. Once a heretic is confessed, he and any accomplices are brought to trial, presided over by the witch hunter himself. It is testimony to the witch hunter's efficiency that very few heretics escape justice. The guilty are sentenced to be drowned, impaled, hung by the neck, nailed to a tree, or burned on a pyre. Repentance is never an option. Many Empire folk fear witch hunters. Rightly so. Perhaps rightly so. It actually says that. That was just me, reacting there. But no, it actually says that in the paragraph too. Perhaps rightly so, for some witch hunters have been known to condemn entire villages to flame on account of a single transgression of the heresy laws. However, witch hunters execute their duties to protect the Empire. If a few innocents must die for the greater good, then so be it. Multitudes would perish should a chaos cult summon a rampaging demon, or should a witch wither fertile cornfields. And of course, I'm sure you've seen the witch hunters in Warhammer Total War, and you've commanded them and all the rest of it. But what I find amazing about the design there is Games Workshop clearly went for that sort of Salem witch trial vibe, because they look just like Puritans. They've got the whole, the hat and all the rest of it. They look very much the part, and I think it's really cool when they sort of pull things from history like that. It's very interesting. So moving back to sort of worship in general, worship does actually change depending on sort of the station of the person. So I mentioned in a previous video the 3 tiers of their sort of their economy, right? So this is kind of their class system. So you have the gold tier, the silver tier, and the brass tier, where it's the noblemen and then the merchants and then the commoners. And there is actually a distinction between how all of these people worship and sort of which gods they deem more important than others. So let's move on to that. So I'll start off with the gold tier. Society's elite tend to display their piety loudly. They occupy prominent positions at temple sermons, appear at all the major religious events, make ostentatious sacrifices to the gods, and sometimes fund the building of new temples. However, many have earned a reputation for paying only lip service to the gods. How many of the nobles or merchants who have enriched the High Temple of Sigmar are prepared to battle the minions of chaos themselves? The Fate's leaders are unwilling to reproach this hypocrisy. The generous gifts of the rich and powerful go far in furthering the Empire cult's ideals. Well-to-do families may send their young sons and daughters to join the Holy Orders, not only to gain influence among the cults, but also to conveniently offload unproductive offspring. As a consequence, the caliber of priests has suffered in several cults. Put an overindulged brat in a priest's frock, and he is still a brat. Of course, many among the cream of society do possess a deep faith, but a majority believe that their high station is a sign of the gods' favour. It is a popular theory to some highborn that lowborn and poverty indicates irredeemable impiety. Not all of society's elite are so blinkered. Magnus the Pious and his sobriquet, because he believed that all were equal in the eyes of the gods, so long as they took up arms and resisted chaos, and Karl Franz seems to hold a similar view. Sigmar is popular among the upper classes because his cult wields the most political influence, though northern nobles often favour Ulrich instead. Verena is revered as a guardian of the laws that maintain privilege, while Manan appeals to the officers in the Imperial Navy, and Mamidia to army captains and generals. All aristocrats pray to Mor to protect the souls of their noble ancestors. It is currently fashionable for noble women to be seen alleviating the suffering of the unwashed masses in Shalia's name. However, Tal and Rhea are generally looked down on as the gods of simpler peasants, while Renald is despised as a god of thieves and scoundrels. And then we move on to the silver tier. The burghers and the tradesmen of the Empire are among the most devout of the Empire's citizens. They must work hard to maintain their livelihood, and if the gods can be persuaded to help alleviate their burdens, then all the better. They consider each tithe of silver to the temples as a sensible investment, hoping that a small donation of their well-earned savings will attract some acknowledgement from the gods. The middle class knows its place, and fear that hubris will earn divine wrath. They are meek in worship and dutiful according to the divine strictures. Sometimes, when business is good, a guild or craftsman or trader might work together to fund repairs for a temple roof or raise a new shrine to thank the gods. Parents are proud if one of their children decides to enter the holy orders, for surely a little bit of piety is going to rub off on the rest of the family. However, they are unwilling to allow too many sons or daughters to become initiates, as who will then take over the family business. The middle class tries to honour all the gods equally, so that every aspect of life is ensured against calamity. The exception is Myrmidia, who is misunderstood by many, imported from strange lands by sun-addled noblemen. Renald is disliked among law-abiding folk, but they still ensure the proper coins are slipped to the right people, so they will turn his eye from their businesses. And the brass tier, while for the most part the gold and silver tiers of society are mainly found in urban settings, bustling cities and commercial towns, the brass tier is unique in its diversity. While wealth, status and privilege may be restricted to certain lifestyles and settings, poverty's no such prejudice. So the urban poor, the people of the urban slums, suffer poverty, hunger and disease, yet they flock to the temples on holy days, for the gods provide them with one thing that helps them fight on: hope. Some cults are sympathetic with the plight of the poor. For example, Shalians organize temple hospices in the slums for the relief of the dispossessed. However, many temple priests alienate the common folk because they cannot empathize with their lives. This is especially true of Sigmar's cult, whose ranks are increasingly filled by initiates from the middle and upper classes. This situation has led to an upsurge in firebrand cultists of Sigmar, who have abandoned the pulpit for the market streets. These priests, born and bred among the poor, have suffered alongside them. They preach the spirit of Sigmar at street corners, railing against heresy, but also castigating the corruption endemic within their own cult. The arch-lectors of Sigmar regard such priests as troublemakers, out to upset the social order, but can do little against them. The recent excommunication of the renegade priest Luthar Huss has made him a popular hero, and the authorities do not want to make any more martyrs. Luthar Huss is an interesting character that we'll hopefully discuss in a later video. Renald, champion of the downtrodden, is popular god among the urban poor, and more is always accorded to the proper rites, for death hovers at every shoulder. Minan is an important god in sea and river ports, and Ulrich rivals the cult of Sigmar among coven folk of the north, sometimes resulting in riots between mobs supporting the two gods. Myrmidia, the goddess of the higher classes, is ignored, and the illiterate masses have little interest in Verena, despite her cult sometimes organizing missions to educate them. Some radicals do not understand why society needs parasitic priests to intercede with the gods on the people's behalf. These are usually the rowdy supporters of agitators who try to stir up revolt against the ruling classes and often end up rutting in Gaul. So yeah, I mean that sums up the urban poor fairly well. However, in the country, things are a little bit different. So country folk are at the mercy of nature. They sacrifice to Raya so that she might make their land and women fertile. They pray to Tal for the protection of their livestock from his wild beasts, and to ensure that he spares their crops from drought. Fisherfolk bow to Manan, and in the north, where it is bitter winter for half of the year, Ulrich is held in high esteem by the tough peasants. Mor is feared and respected as he is by all folk. However, the other gods have little to offer simple farming folk. Raya, in her aspect as mother goddess, is often more popular than Shalia, and even reverence for Sigmar is muted in some rural areas, for the concepts of empire and emperor are remote to farmers and herdsmen who travel no further than neighbouring hamlets. However, every sizable village has a shrine to Sigmar to keep the witch hunters happy. In places barely touched by civilization, deep in the forest or lost among the hills, there are folk who still follow ancient traditions forgotten elsewhere. They believe that every stone, tree, and river hides a nature spirit that must be appeased. Some peasants even claim to see or commune with such beings, and sacrifice to them at ancient stone circles. So, real Stonehenge vibe there. Lovely. These ignorant folk have sometimes mistaken elves as nature spirits. Official dogma teaches that Empire folk should revere only those gods sanctioned by imperial tradition, and the cult of Sigmar regards the worship of nature spirits as being dangerously close to demon worship. The cult often sends missionaries to educate, it's in quotes there, educate, the errors of such country folk, and where preaching fails, the hammer usually succeeds. So, I think that sums up, how class goes hand in hand with religion there. I think that's really interesting. Sort of know that there is a difference throughout. It's not a sort of two-dimensional thing where these gods are worshipped. But no, there is different people will worship different gods in sort of with more importance depending on their lives. So I just think that's great. There's that level of depth. Also, there are certain times of people's lives that are celebrated, right? So birthdays and, weddings, all the rest of it. And in the Empire, they have their own ways of doing things too. Birth and marriage. This is from Signs of Faith, another 3rd edition supplement. So when a woman feels the first stirrings of life in her womb, she prays to Shalia, or to Raya, through Tal if she is a rural peasant, for the health of her unborn child. Wealthy women will sacrifice an expectant sow, cow, or even mare, but most others make do with a pregnant cat, or at a pinch, a rat. At a pinch, really? The father makes an offering to Tal, Ulrich, or Sigmar, so that his child will be strong, and to Mor to stay his hand. Of course, Mor is the god of death, so yeah, we don't want him turning up to, something like a birth. That's just a terrible idea. But anyway, mortality at childbirth is high, unless a family can afford a physician. Poor women are attended by a midwife, hopefully a skilled cultist of Shalia, or Raya in rural areas. The priest cannot invoke blessings to help the mother, for Mor, god of death, must be allowed to claim mother or child if he demands it. Traditionally, the father buries a coin in a safe place. It is unlucky to remove this coin until the child comes of age, when the father will dig up the coin and present it to the child as a symbol of entry into adulthood. No good will come to the person who loses his birth coin. On the anniversary of a person's birth, friends and family offer sacrifices to Shalia or Rhea for his or her continued health. Society frowns upon unmarried mothers. The upper classes arrange marriages to form political and mercantile alliances. Among the lower classes, a mother who bears a child out of wedlock is disgraced, unless she gives her child to the cult of Shalia to be adopted as an initiate. So very much like, real life, I guess Catholic traditions, over the years have been very much, you need to hand over the child to the priesthood, because it's been born out of wedlock, got to save its soul somehow. It's pretty grim, to be honest. So for the rich, marriage involves a grandiose ball and a blessing by a high-ranking lector, but most folk have to settle for a simple hand-fasting ritual with a few words mumbled by a priest. And I've actually got details here. Swapping book here, back to the Tome of Blessings. There's a festival called the Wedding Jug. So marriage in the Empire is mostly secular, and for common folk, a simple affair. A priest presides over the marriage, and in some areas of the Reichland, the short ceremony is completed by the couple jumping over a jug or bowl. It is bad luck to break the wedding jug thereafter, so this item usually has pride of place in the house. Because courtship and conception belong to Tal and Rhea, it is their priests who are often invited to preside over weddings. However, any priest will do, and priests of all faiths are common officiants, except for priests of Mor, who many feel are out of place at a joyous celebration. So, that's all quite happy, right? Marriage and babies and things. But also, there's sort of a rite of passage. So as well as this birth coin thing, there's also a ritual called the Dooming that most people go through in the Empire, which sounds just horrible, doesn't it? The Dooming? So it's at the age of 10, most children endure the Dooming ceremony, which is carried out in different ways throughout the Empire. In Reichland, to grant long life, meat and milk mixed with the child's blood is thrown on a brazier, so that Mor thinks the child is already in his underrealm. The ceremony always culminates in the terrified child being left alone with the doomsayer of Mor. The priest interprets the omens to reveal the child's fate. This ritual is meant to stiffen the child's courage in preparation for life. It is reckoned that a person's fear of death is conquered when he knows and accepts his own doom. People keep their dooming secret in case their enemies use that knowledge against them. So they have some crazy priest 10 years old, they have this guy tell them how they're going to die. I mean, that is terrible, isn't it? But, yeah, apparently that's good preparation for later in life. But, horrible. Absolutely horrible. Although, when a person does eventually die, it is vital that the rites of Moor are whispered over the body as soon as possible. A brief commendation of the dead person's soul to Moor must suffice in the absence of a proper priest. If this is not done, it is believed that the soul will wander lost, unable to enter Moor's kingdom, allowing necromancers or the ruinous powers to enslave it. Ideally, the corpse must be buried before sundown within the garden of Moor, which are the cemeteries basically are referred to as gardens, which is actually quite nice, considering how bleak, the god of death is going to be, But no, the gardens, I think that's very, very sweet. So this is where Moor priests can guard it against necromantic magic. Bodies buried elsewhere must be decapitated or have their hearts staked to prevent them from rising, or are buried at crossroads to confuse the spirit and stop it returning to haunt the village. Because, yeah, terrible sense of direction, ghosts. Just don't have a clue. That's why they're always walking through walls. There is a legend that Sigmar visited and returned from Moor's underworld, but otherwise no living person knows what that place is like. Not even spirits summoned from the afterlife can be induced to talk about the afterlife. The wealthy are buried in extravagant mausoleums or family vaults, while the poor are commemorated by a simple slab. Priests of Moor must dig up old graves to make way for fresh burials, and the exhausted bones are stored in ossuaries. So, then we talked about death, but sometimes you don't actually die, but a part of you goes to the afterlife, and such as when you lose a limb, and there's actually a occasion for that. It's a ritual called Mourn Limb, which is another ritual dedicated to Moor, and it's where soldiers and sailors gather outside a garden of Moor to drink and toast to the memory of the parts of their bodies which have gone ahead of them into death, which I just think is great. So they have little ceremonies, to sort of toast to their arms. So, it's pretty commonplace, though, in a world like this, sort of ploughing your fields, orc takes your arm, you've got to have an occasion for that, and they do. However, there is one more little ritual I want to talk about as well, which is called the Spirit Walk. So this is something that's practiced in small villages and towns far from the likes of Altdorf. It's the tradition known as the Spirit Walk. Elders of the community will pack 1 skin of water, 1 skin of wine, and 1 loaf of bread, and then walk off into the forest, or along a stream or other trail, until the bread and water are nearly gone. They then pour the wine out as an offering to the local spirits they believe protect their community, before returning home. However, in some of the more remote villages, it is said the elders do not return from their spirit walk, making themselves a final offering to their patron spirits. So, in these remote places, they don't necessarily have these, temples to Sigmar and stuff, and all these, powerful people to protect them. So, they just cling on to those little traditions, and, kind of feel sorry for those old guys wandering off and not returning. Everyone thinking they're a sacrifice, but they've probably actually just been killed by beastmen or something. So that's very sad. Bless them. And I think on that note, we should probably finish this video off. I know I've barely spoken about the different cults at all. This is just about people, really. Haven't spoken about the sort of hierarchy of the temples and the different cults, all the sort of priests and whatnot. But I will be talking about that in the next episode, along with the calendar, because there are a lot of holidays to talk about, because every good fantasy world needs a good holiday. So we'll be talking about that in the next one. So if you enjoyed this, give it a like, comment, feel free to correct me, or say where you found things that differ, and tell me your source, because I do know this stuff changes a lot from edition to edition, from battlebook to battlebook. So it's always good to know what the other ones say. So it'd be great to hear. So of course it goes without saying, but if you want to see more, then give me a subscribe, and YouTube will tell you every time I release one of these, which is just great, right? So yeah, I'll leave you with a quote. So goes the popular Stirland saying, "We are born, we weep, we die." Have a great day, everybody.